Today, we have yet another Salt and Sacrifice adventure, except this one is a bit different. You see, thrown weapons are a really unique type of item in this game. There are only 5 of them, none of the classes start with one, and they essentially are unique firebombs that you don't have to buy. Sounds like a cool challenge run, but sadly, while this is theoretically possible, it didn't happen. The damage on these can't beat certain bosses unless you could no-hit them in what is essentially hyper mode, and there's no way to fix that by farming levels because their damage cap is very low. My solution was to allow firebombs whenever we can't move forward. Technically, firebombs are a thrown weapon, even though they aren't in this category per se. Oh, and to those of you who asked me to try these out, no more suggestions from you people. I think you'll understand why by the end. Jokes aside, it's time to get this run moving. Can you beat Salt and Sacrifice with only thrown weapons, plus the occasional firebomb? Kronos was one of the several who asked for a throwing item run. Our class isn't super important, so we go with Cleric. Then we'll want Arson as our crime for 5 firebombs. The tutorial boss clearly isn't happening. Instead, we move on to farm some supply sacks. These can drop firebombs and poison bombs. The inventory limit on each is 5. Abnormally low amount, but we want at least a few extra in supply for a small workaround. On the first boss, you'll notice firebombs are insanely powerful. Weirdly, you can restock firebombs almost infinitely. Once you're out, let loose an ammunition into the air, and then restocking your ammo will grant back firebombs. No clue at all why it works this way, but it lets us beat the boss. Grabbing the grapple hook for movement, we need to clear out 1 mage in order to open up a door. I chose Ice Mage, considering the firebombs should obliterate his HP in a matter of seconds. Turns out I was 100% correct with that hypothesis. This opens up access to the Water Mage. He too drops rather quickly after we use all 5 poison and fire explosives, though we do need 1 melee to break their health completely, since mages can't die to status effects. With new materials in hand, we can craft the Deep Pods, Class 1 throwing items scaling B in strength and low in conviction. They deal cold and dark damage. Perfect for the moment, as cold is really great against fire. We upgrade our ammo amount and head off to finish World 1. These perform pretty great right now, though I already saw a major problem. Their starting upgrade path consists of purple items, the one and only bad upgrade color. These are rare to drop and can't be found around the world really, at least not in the tier 1 form that we need right now, meaning we get no weapon upgrades and need to rely solely on that strength stat to carry us. For ranged builds, this horse or donkey boss is a gigantic hurdle. He's too fast for you to get restocks off, preventing you from using your max amount of ammo. He also sports a hefty HP amount for the second main boss. We didn't even come close to beating him before we ran out of water bombs. Good thing we can grab the Bolgaron runestone and make our way to World 2. Knockoff Quelaag can be impossible depending on the ranged item, just because he too has a ton of HP. You practically can't miss a single throw, as we win with only 1 ammo left to speak of. Magnesium supply is a really important item as it opens up a lot of potential upgrades in our stats. Wind Mage turned out to be one of many encounters that would be pure pain on my end. With how spammy these bosses can be, you need to simply roll around, not trying to deal damage until you get 1 moment to throw. These have super short range for a ranged item, so you can't get far away for safer opportunities. Makes fights take multiple minutes to complete rather than around 20 to 30 seconds. Thankfully, this isn't my first run, so I know the attacks well enough to survive. For the most part anyway. With 18 ammunition in total, we grab the Draped Amulet for faster stamina regen. I grabbed the key to the DLC, which we're gonna need sooner rather than later. Rockman is highly resistant to damage, and yet he was still doable. Because mages start their final fights at lower HP, we're never in any risk of running out of our ammo for them. Restocking can be tougher, but bide your time and it's doable. He dropped a utility artifact for 5% range damage and 6% free ammunition chance. Not very high numbers, which is a bummer, but still better than nothing. Here's where we hit the second brick wall of the run. This time, there's no way around. The second boss of World 2 is completely impassable. We can't get his HP to even half before we're out of our weapons uses entirely. While this is going to be a real kick in the underside, we do have an option or two. Heading into the DLC, I made my way to the hidden boss fight. It's here we can pick up 3 twin void upgrades. One of the NPCs at the hub can break down these upgrade materials, turning a twin into 2 singles. This means we can upgrade our deep pods up to 4 times. Yes, it is still a real trouble to restock against the archer boss, but our damage definitely has increased as he goes down with 11 left in stock. Lightning Mage is much easier when using cold damage, from my experience. Add in the fact that he is designed around you using ranged damage, and this was an easy one. Defeating him grants us up to 19 ammo in total and lets us craft a new knife. This one grants a huge damage bonus when your HP is under 20%. That's right, people, we're going hyper mode for this one. And that plan didn't work at all. This boss is extremely difficult in the first place. Our what should be 40-some damage is only 26 because he's resistant to cold and dark, I guess. I couldn't come even close still. My next thought was to try the duo boss in the DLC. They're really weak, but it seems I am even weaker. They basically took no damage, and when I went into hyper mode, it was more than possible to stay alive, surprisingly, but the damage still wasn't there. Our next throwing weapon is past this World 2 boss. This World 2 boss is impossible with our damage. So, with only one option left, I headed back to World 1 and hunted all of the nameless mages, as well as the fated mage hunts we can do here. After about 5 mage encounters, we had leveled our strength substantially, and none of them were much different than their normal versions, outside of me dying a few times to get the wins. The only nameless mage I couldn't beat was the water. He summons a minion which makes him invincible, and anytime you kill the minion, the guy instantly respawns it, so we don't have resources for that. But I'm okay with it, because we have 30 strength and 17 conviction. Surely that, plus hyper mode, should be enough for World 2's second boss. I mean, come on, it's gotta be, right? And so, for the next half hour, I attempted to no-hit the Tireless Exalted, a boss that will instantly kill you if his death status ever builds up. We need all but 2 of these pods to hit for damage. We also can't attack unless he summons in ghosts. This is the only time where it's 100% safe and he won't pull out a quick melee attack. It's a long and tedious process, but ultimately with the hyper mode, we can beat this boss with only thrown weapons. I do not recommend it. The amount of effort required is a bit much, though we do finally have access to more build options. Or at least that's what I thought. The undead mage doesn't give us anything outside of more levels, though we do grab another ammunition here in this castle. You may notice that I played several hours of this run with purple health. This was because I didn't want to waste my limited guiltless shards, and it seemed like I might be dying a lot. We next hunt down the Thumamancer, or Holy Mage. This guy has another throwing weapon we could potentially use. Because we have on almost no armor for a light roll, it's pretty easy to roll a few times away for a safe restock, even on a magic caster as active as this guy. It's about time we purchase the Flasks of Judgment. They deal pure light damage and scale poorly with conviction. We grab the World 3 runestone and head towards the swamp to test them out. To my dismay, our new weapon is basically unusable. It deals 1 damage type instead of 2, so it's harder to boost up the numbers. It also gains barely any damage from leveling up since the scaling is so poor and it only scales in 1 stat. Somehow, the not-so-great deep pods are still outputting more damage. Well, with Mushroom Man down, we can grab Spore Pods and try those instead. These are a bit different as their actual stats don't really matter at all. They explode into a rot cloud on impact and build up the rot status. While the status is crazy good, these clouds are really horrible at applying the stuff. Bosses really don't take almost any damage from these, and it takes half your ammo just to briefly apply the rot. I'm afraid to say 2 out of the 5 options we get for this run are complete trash. Back to the old pods, I guess. This is where we run into a boss that gave me the business. In theory, it should be possible to beat this boss with only the throwing weapons. In theory, that is, because you don't have enough damage unless you stay in one hit range for the entire fight. And I can't for the life of me figure out how you could do that, since she fills the whole arena up with minions towards the end. As I said, in theory, the damage should check out. You just need to no-hit this by being the luckiest human being alive. I, however, was not that lucky and simply could not beat her. So this is where we had to add back in those firebombs. With just 5 firebombs and our normal damage from pods, she went down first try. It turns out we should have done a firebomb only run instead of these things, because that's looking a lot easier right about now. With the Lumin Stone for our next traversal item, we need to get a few upgrades. Oddly, 3 out of the 5 throwing weapon options are located in this swamp. No end-game options for us, unfortunately, as we won't be getting much past this point right here. Corpumancer does the usual of helping us out a bunch. Outside of being a pretty tricky mage fight, he can make a ring to increase our damage, as well as an amulet to increase our damage even further. Sap Blood Heart is yet another boss we do not have enough damage for, and Hyper Mode didn't seem like much of an option since once again this is an arena with minions that add in a lot of random damage. At the very least, we can go grab 2 more ammunition slots hanging out in the treetop here. Mechanomancer looked like the first mage who would have too much health for us. But after dying just once, his health went all the way down below half, because this game is really weird like that. I honestly can't explain how that works, they just lose a ton of HP if you die to him. After that, he was easy pickings. With his materials, we can craft what are called Mechanum Bombs. S scaling in strength with E in luck. So we now need to level luck as well, but that S is looking mighty nice right about now. These are really terrible as well. That's not entirely true, I guess, since they have a major advantage we'll be using later on, but for this particular boss, they also couldn't crack it. So I went back to the water pods with a few firebombs to help me out. Now, this was a mistake on my part. For some reason, I was thinking the Lumin Mage was blocked by this boss. That is not the case. We should have gone for the Lumin Mage to get our last throwing weapon. Maybe that one could have done it without the firebombs. I don't know for sure, but I sadly did not get to test that out. Either way, 2 of the easiest bosses in Sacrifice became nearly impossible for this run. It was a crazy hurdle to jump over for sure. With Dreadstone Peak available, we go after the Lumin Mage. This is where I noticed something really interesting about the Mechanum Bombs. They don't blow up right away. Instead, they act as a stick of dynamite. But while you might think that they simply explode for damage on a delay, they actually deal damage twice. Hitting an enemy with the stick of dynamite will deal damage. Then when the explosion goes off a few seconds later, that also does damage. Our new weapon can potentially hit twice for every single throw. Problem is, the sticks bounce back towards you, so any faster or slower enemy can get out of the explosion if you hit them initially. This also makes them entirely unusable against flying foes. However, don't forget about these. We'll be coming back to them. Luminous Spheres can now be crafted. These deal cold and light damage, with E scaling and conviction. Sounds bad, but for some reason, these deal the highest damage of all the throwing weapons. This is partially why I'm not a big fan of the scaling in this game. Even in most games, it seems S doesn't really mean anything to me at this point. You still should upgrade the worst items anyway, just to see if they end up with higher damage. But hey, at least we finally have a major increase in power before hitting the end game. I really grew to like the Lumin Orbs, as they look the most interesting in your hand. This small orb getting chucked into an enemy and exploding into a burst of light. However, we would need the Mechanum Bombs for the duo boss. These don't explode on impact, allowing the detonation to hit both bosses at the same time. Since they share a health bar, it means they go down much better than they do when you're using a melee weapon. After that, it was back to the Lumin for a while. We can crush through the Brain Mage with relative ease, accessing our second to last ammo upgrade. I ended up having to max at 23 instead of the total of 24, because even after hours of farming, I could not get any more leather to craft the last one. Time Mage is our final important encounter as he holds a necklace we need. Something that should be noted here is that grappling was very much a mechanic I needed to utilize. On the other ranged weapon runs, I usually don't grapple, as it's not something I have to go for. While it is allowed, as it's technically the critical attack you can always use, I try to avoid it for the sake of pure ranged damage. Not on this run, we simply don't have enough damage and need that extra crit to get us through. With the increased restock speed amulet, it's officially time to go. I breezed through the next couple of mages with no major issues popping up. The fights are incredibly slow, as again I can't throw unless I'm pretty close to the enemy, and if I'm in pretty close, they love to endlessly melee attack. Patience was a key for this playthrough, and it really made me watch for each and every attack, since we don't have any armor to take more than one hit at a time. Dragon, demon, and dark all going down, and it was time for the easy dragon fight. But then again, this is a different kind of run, so of course he had to be a problem. The issue with this encounter was quite simple actually. Every time I would throw, he would bite forward the perfect distance to hit me. Then he would breathe fire 4 times in a row, which requires you to jump in melee 4 times to hold above the flames. No matter how long I waited to read his next attack, he always went for a bite when I would throw, almost as if he was input reading me perfectly. That, on top of him flying up every few seconds, did not make things easy on me. Ends up, the only way to get in attacks was to jump. For some reason, he still did that bite attack every time, but if you jump, you're just outside of it, and to get more distance on your throw. Doesn't really feel like you would be away from the bite at that distance, but you are. Probably the hardest this fight has ever been for me, though at this point, I was not really surprised at all. With the runestone to outer cops, we need to keep pressing forward. Our Inquisitor friend is extremely doable, although you can only throw once and then roll away. Throw once again, then roll away again. An unbeatable strategy, let me tell you. Both mages and the Elder Cops went down without a single death to them. Neither were all that aggressive. I had made sure to chase down as many heals as possible by this point, so even if I did get into trouble, there was more than enough red flasks available for me to tank through hit after hit. These fights were more of a test of my mental endurance than anything else. I decided to climb the left tower first this time, since our weapons upgrade is over here. Also, I was dreading that right tower, which is a complete and total nightmare even on normal runs. You will need to jump before throwing, as this guy can get very high up in the air, out of your throw range. I had forgotten how tough he can be, seeing as you can typically steamroll over him by this point. His lightning can be almost impossible to avoid if you aren't hiding in one of the corners. Here we find the Frost Brick, which means our luminous spheres are at max power of 65.5 damage. The right tower was nowhere near as painful as I had expected, but then again, ranged options are more built for this side. Worm has been a major pain for me lately. I chose to roll through him into a corner until he got close. These have some of the worst range for any of the ammunition items, though I found that using the bee-hopping method or just jump throws entirely made up for it. You almost don't notice a range limitation at all if you do that. This boss dropped an artifact granting 8% range damage and 17% chance for free ammunition, which was a major upgrade over what we had up until this point. Owl Mageman mostly lore walks forward as you continue moving backwards. I may or may not be getting too comfortable with a light roll at this point. You just move around so much more quickly and can make up for badly timed dodges with another one. Whereas even just one weight above, you need to be far more accurate or you get roll caught way more often. For the DLC, I decided to bring out the TNT packages once again. These are probably my favorite throwing item because not only do they look the coolest, but the double hit mechanic gives them much more player interactivity. You are no longer point and click, instead you're trying to aim in a way that will get the bosses to walk into the AoE. Very fun idea. The duo got obliterated as this method proved highly effective against multiple targets. You can even get the sticks to glue onto a wall as the boss walks by. Again, these are best when bosses walk towards you, allowing you to hit with the throw and then have them walk into the explosion. You kinda just know when they're gonna be the most effective. These were extremely satisfying against the herbalist as well. I almost did enough damage to one phaser. In fact, she had a sliver of health at one point. But I just wasn't as fast with my throws as her healer was with the healing. Took me a little while to get rid of that pot, since she was protecting it pretty heavily. Once it was gone though, she was toast. Not really sure why her health bar was draining with a large yellow bar. Maybe the explosions added onto her heal effects goofed with it a bit. The 4 divines are as unenjoyable as ever, but at the very least, we can easily target the eyeballs for damage as long as we move to the correct platform. Bows and throwing axes were far better for this fight, as both have more range. However, this was still far better than any melee or magic option in my experience. Barracks was quite the looming presence. With 2 HP bars to chunk through, we'll be in this one for a while. Sadly, this was not possible without at least a few firebombs. He tends to jump or flip across the entire arena. This keeps my TNT from exploding and dealing damage on the initial hit. The Lumin balls also didn't seem to deal enough damage. Once again, this is a boss that in theory is possible. Hyper mode would in fact do it, though I can't personally no-hit this boss. I tried. With good enough relics, it's possible since you get free ammo at times. But in the end, RNG was not on my side. It was hard enough to make it through my ammo in the first place. This guy loves to instantly attack without any little indication at all. And man, these throwing weapons feel really slow to get off. Even after 5 firebombs, he still had more HP. I had switched out my restock amulet for the increased damage again, meaning restocks were almost impossible to get unless he was buffing. But thankfully, that's just what he did. With no heals, HP, or ammo left, we only have 1 boss remaining. Going into the final boss fight, we're sitting at level 86 with 34 strength, 42 conviction, and 25 luck. The Chrono Blade amulet increases our restock speed. Cryomancer's pick increases our cold damage for the Lumin Orbs. Luminous spheres are the best option for the most part. Gold ring increases our damage and defense. Leather ring increases our damage. We have on the Cleric skirt and arm wraps with an artifact for 8% better range damage and 17% chance for free ammunition. Will this be enough to take on the final boss of Sultan's Sacrifice? Well, my answer is no. I was more than surprised at how poorly this was going. For some reason, every time I went to throw my orb, he would jump in the air as it misses just under him. Every single time he would do this. These just don't have enough range, even with me jumping to arc them further. The next best strategy was to only throw after he did his stick throw move. This is the only moment where he can't randomly avoid our damage, but that is extremely tedious since he doesn't do that attack all the time. After several attempts, it turns out he just simply dodges too much. Even if I no-hit most of this fight for several minutes, we don't have the damage. Then I decided to do a quick test run with the dynamite sticks. To my surprise, these always connect twice. If you keep backing up, he'll lore walk right into both instances of damage. So while these are weaker than the Lumin Orbs, they will deal twice as much damage here. That's really all there is to it. After farming out more ammo and coming back into the fight, he was no trouble at all. This begs the question, are Machanum bombs or Lumin bombs the better pick? Both need different stats, which spreads you a little thin, but my money is riding on the Machanum bombs. They are useless outside of boss fights because of the bounce, but in boss fights, that bounce makes them a crazy useful tool. And there you have the Sultan Sacrifice thrown weapon only run. Is this possible? Yes, technically. I personally could not make it work without a few extra firebombs. You would need to no-hit both swamp bosses and the DLC final boss, even though he is optional. But even then, there's no way to start the game with thrown weapons anyway. So I'm okay with the result we ended up with. At 11 hours and 8 minutes, it took me through 39 deaths to complete this. Ultimately, thrown weapons are not great. Tough to upgrade early on, extremely poor on damage until halfway through the game, and they don't have much range. I do love the idea of a reusable firebomb type of weapon though, and the TNT design on Machanum bombs is pretty darn awesome. If you did enjoy the video, don't forget to like down below and let me know what ranged option you want to see next. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.